Her laughter was the kind of sound that cuts through your brain, sharp and mocking, like nails on glass. "Hey, so, I figured I'd just save you the trouble of hearing this in person." She started casual, like she was discussing the weather. I was standing in the middle of a crowded New York sidewalk, my briefcase in one hand, phone pressed to my ear with the other. "I'm divorcing you," she said, the words tumbling out so effortlessly I almost thought I misheard her. But then she kept going, her voice rising with confidence. "Actually, I've already sold our apartment. You should have gotten the email about it. Oh, and just so you're clear, I've moved on. My new man and I have plans. Big ones." I stopped walking. The tide of people swept around me, shoulders bumping, curses muttered under their breath. She was still talking, her voice buzzing in my ear like an electrical current. "You'll need to find a new place," she said, the smugness in her tone unmistakable. Then she laughed, soft at first but building, like she was savoring how perfectly she delivered the final blow. I stood frozen, staring at nothing, the world around me a blur of movement and noise. "You there?" she asked after a pause, her voice syrupy sweet now. "Or did I break you?" "No," I replied, my tone flat, giving nothing away. "I'm here." "Good. I thought you'd fall apart or something. Anyway, good luck, babe," she said, the fake endearment practically dripping venom. "Bye now." The line went dead, and with it, something inside me. I didn't call back. I didn't even look at my phone to check for the email she mentioned. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket and walked. My feet carried me without direction, weaving through crowds, my briefcase swinging loosely at my side. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out the city's noise. The more I thought about what she'd said, the more a single question consumed me. Why does she sound so confident? She had underestimated me. That much was clear. But the apartment, sold without my signature? Her new man? It didn't add up, not yet. I hailed a cab, my hand steady even though my chest felt like it might cave in. As I climbed in and gave the driver my hotel's address, I forced myself to think past the shock. Something about this didn't just feel wrong, it felt calculated. When I got back to my hotel room, I opened my laptop. My inbox was a minefield of unread messages, but one subject line stood out like a flashing red light. "Congratulations on the sale." I clicked it. The email was short and professional, the kind of thing you'd expect from a real estate agent. The apartment had been sold 2 days ago, well over market value. My name wasn't mentioned once in the paperwork attached. My blood ran cold. There was only one way she could have done this without me. Forgery. And if she'd gone that far, then this wasn't just about leaving me. She was making a statement. She wanted me crushed, homeless, alone. And as I stared at the email, the attachment open on my screen, I noticed something. The agent's name. I knew it. Not personally, but I'd heard it before, through her. She wasn't working alone. My phone buzzed. It was a text, but not from her. It was from a mutual friend, Jason. "Hey man," it read. "I know you're in New York, but are you okay? Just saw something weird. Call me when you can." Weird? I dialed him immediately. He picked up on the first ring. "Dude," Jason said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "I just ran into Ava. She was with some guy. They were all over each other at that cafe downtown." And he hesitated. "And what?" I pressed. "She was wearing a ring. Not yours." For a moment I didn't speak. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the phone. "I thought you should know," Jason added after the silence stretched too long. "Thanks," I said, my voice cold enough to make him pause before replying. "You good, man?" "I'm great," I lied, hanging up before he could pry any further. I stared at the wall for what felt like an eternity, piecing together everything she'd done. Every insult she'd slipped under her breath, every late night she spent out, every dismissal of my concerns. She'd been building to this, setting me up to fall hard. But she'd made a mistake. She thought I was predictable, that I'd lie down and let her win. But I wasn't just going to take this. If she wanted to play games, I'd make damn sure she lost. The next morning, I caught the first flight home. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back. Not her, not Jason, not even my assistant. I wanted the element of surprise. By the time I landed, My mind was spinning with possibilities. Her confidence wasn't just arrogance. It was built on something or someone giving her the upper hand. The new man, the forged documents, the ring Jason saw, it all pointed to a larger scheme. And if there's one thing I've learned in business, it's that confidence like hers only comes from thinking every angle has been covered. She was wrong. I took a cab straight from the airport to our apartment. My apartment, I reminded myself, because no matter what she claimed, I hadn't signed a single thing. As we pulled up, I spotted her car in the driveway. A part of me clenched at the sight of it. She was home, comfortable, probably sipping coffee with him. I didn't knock. I had my key, and if she'd thought to change the locks, she didn't know me well enough to realize I always kept a spare hidden. The door swung open, and the familiar smell of cedar and vanilla, her favorite candle scent, hit me like a wave. Except now it wasn't comforting. It was nauseating. I heard voices, 2 of them. "Relax, babe," a man was saying. His voice was smooth, too polished, like a cheap con artist. "It's all handled. He won't know what hit him." Her laugh followed, soft and mocking. "Oh, trust me, he already doesn't. Did you hear him on the phone yesterday?" Pathetic. I walked further in, my footsteps deliberate. The voices grew louder as I neared the living room. "Once we get the payout from the apartment, we're set," she said. "And if he tries anything, well," she trailed off, but the threat hung heavy in the air. "If he tries anything, he'll regret it," the man finished for her. I stepped into the room. The look on her face was worth every sleepless night I'd spent questioning my sanity. Her confidence evaporated in an instant, replaced by a flicker of panic she couldn't quite mask. "Hi, Ava," I said, my voice calm, almost pleasant. Then I shifted my gaze to him. He was exactly what I expected. Tall, tan, and wearing a suit that was trying too hard to look expensive. "And you must be?" The man didn't answer, glancing at Ava instead. She recovered quickly, though, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Funny," I said, stepping further into the room. "I was going to ask you the same thing. This is my apartment, after all." "It's not your apartment anymore," she snapped. "It's ours, and you're trespassing." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and opened the email from the real estate agent. "Because according to this, the sale isn't even finalized. And even if it were, I never signed off on it." I turned the screen toward her, and for a moment, she faltered. "You'll be out soon enough," she said, recovering. "Face it, you've already lost." I ignored her and turned my attention back to him. "So what's your role in all this? Just the sidekick? Or are you the one pulling the strings?" He smirked, leaning back on the couch like he owned the place. "I'm the one giving her what she deserves. Something you clearly couldn't manage." Ava let out a low laugh, but I caught the way her hand twitched. She wasn't as confident as she wanted me to believe. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider his words. "Interesting," I said, "because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're giving her a whole lot of liability." That wiped the smirk off his face. "What the hell's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, my voice dropping to a near growl, "that I've already contacted the bank about the forged documents, and the fact that you're sitting here, bragging about your involvement, that's not going to look great when the police show up." Ava stood abruptly, her face pale. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I said, taking a step closer. "Because you've crossed every line, Ava. This isn't just a divorce. This is fraud, conspiracy, hell, you might even get racketeering if they dig deep enough." "You're bluffing," she hissed, but her voice wavered. "Try me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the forged signatures, the bank's response to my inquiry, and a little extra leverage I hadn't planned on using so soon. Screenshots of texts between Ava and her new man that Jason had sent me last night. Her mouth opened and closed like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The man stood, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you're so smart, huh? You don't scare me." "Good," I said, holding his gaze. "Then you won't mind sticking around for the fallout." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Then Ava grabbed his arm. "Let's go," she said through gritted teeth. He hesitated, but her grip tightened, and they both stormed past me, slamming the door on their way out. I exhaled, my chest still tight with anger, but there was a flicker of satisfaction buried underneath. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, I had the upper hand. The silence in the apartment was deafening after they left. For a moment, I stood there, taking it all in. The overturned coffee cup on the table, the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the air, the imprint of their chaos everywhere. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. I placed the folder on the kitchen counter and leaned against it, running through my next steps. Ava thought she'd hit me where it hurt, but all she'd done was expose herself. And the best part? She had no idea how deep I was willing to dig to make sure her carefully constructed fantasy came crashing down. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, Victor. He was sharp, ruthless, and had a particular talent for unraveling complicated cases like this. When I explained the situation, he didn't miss a beat. "She forged your signature? And sold the apartment without your consent?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with disbelief. "Exactly," I said, pacing the living room now. "I have proof. Documents, emails, texts, everything." Victor let out a low whistle. "Well, she's screwed, but we need to move fast. The moment she realizes you're serious, she's going to try to cover her tracks." "Let her try," I said, a bitter smile creeping onto my face. "I'll be ready." After hanging up, I made another call, this time to a private investigator. If Ava wanted to burn everything down, I was going to make sure I had the matches and gasoline to do it better. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Harper, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "What's the priority?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "I need to know who he is, what he does, where he's vulnerable. And I need it fast." Harper promised to get back to me within 48 hours. That was all I needed to hear. The rest of the day was a blur of calls, emails, and planning. But when night fell, I found myself sitting in the darkened living room, staring at the faint outline of the city skyline through the window. Memories of Ava flooded my mind, her laugh, her touch, the way she used to look at me like I was the only thing that mattered. How long had it all been a lie? A notification lit up my phone, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a message from Harper. "Got something. Call me." I didn't hesitate. When she picked up, her tone was brisk. "Your guy's name is Grant Miller. Runs a small real estate firm, shady as hell. He's had multiple lawsuits against him. Fraud, misrepresentation, even a domestic abuse case, though it didn't stick. He's drowning in debt, but he's good at keeping up appearances." I felt a grim satisfaction settle in my chest. And him and Ava? Looks like they've been seeing each other for months. He's been using her to funnel money into his failing business. And from what I've seen, she's too caught up in the fantasy to notice or care. My grip on the phone tightened. "Send me everything you have." "Already done," Harper said. "But there's one more thing you should know." "What?" "They're planning to skip town. Probably next week, maybe sooner. If you want to stop them, you'll need to act fast." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. So that was their game. Squeeze me dry and disappear before the fallout hit. But they weren't going anywhere. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. First, I contacted the bank and froze every account with my name on it, including the joint ones Ava had been draining for months. Then I filed a legal claim to block the apartment sale until the forgery could be proven. By noon, Victor called with an update. "The papers are in motion. She'll be served by tomorrow," he said. "But what's your endgame here? Are you looking for a clean break? Or do you want to make this messy?" I didn't even have to think about it. "Messy," I said. "As messy as it gets." Victor chuckled. "Good answer. Let's make it happen." That evening, I sent Ava a single text. "We need to talk. At the apartment. Tonight." Her response came almost immediately. "What's there to talk about? I've moved on." "So should you," I replied with a single sentence. "You'll want to hear what I have to say." The bait was set. When she walked through the door that night, her expression was a mix of irritation and curiosity. "This better be quick," she said, tossing her bag onto the couch. But the moment she saw the folder on the counter, her entire demeanor shifted. She froze, her eyes darting from the documents to my face. "What's this?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "This?" I said, my tone cold and measured. Is every lie you've told, every signature you've forged, and every text you thought I wouldn't find. It's also the reason you're not going anywhere. Her jaw tightened, but she forced a laugh. You're bluffing. You don't have anything. I stepped closer, holding her gaze. Try me. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. A flicker of doubt, quickly masked by anger. You don't know what you're doing, she hissed. You're just embarrassing yourself. No, I said, my voice razor sharp. I'm embarrassing you, and I'm just getting started. Ava's eyes darted to the folder, then back to me. Her defiance faltered, just for a moment. But it was enough to tell me she wasn't as untouchable as she wanted to appear. I stayed where I was, arms crossed, letting the silence stretch. The tension in the room thickened with every second she didn't speak. Finally, she broke. Fine, she said, lifting her chin. Let's hear it. What exactly do you think you've uncovered? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up the folder and slowly opened it, pulling out the first sheet. A printout of the forged signature from the apartment sale. I held it up for her to see. This is your masterpiece, isn't it? My name, my signature. Except, it's not mine. I tapped the page for emphasis. The bank confirmed it. You know what that means, don't you? Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she still tried to play it cool. It means nothing. It's just a piece of paper. I smiled. A sharp, humorless thing. It means you committed fraud. And the penalty for that isn't exactly a slap on the wrist. She folded her arms, trying to project confidence. But I could see the cracks forming. So what? You're going to run to the cops? Drag this out in court? You're not that petty. I leaned forward, just enough to make her take a step back. Oh, Ava, you have no idea how petty I can be. She started to speak, but I cut her off by pulling out the next document. A bank statement showing every transfer she'd made from our joint account to her new life fund. Let's talk about this too, I said, holding it up. You've been bleeding our account dry for months. Tell me, how much of this went to your little boyfriend's failing real estate firm? Her mask of indifference slipped completely. You don't know what you're talking about, she snapped, her voice rising. Don't I? I countered, stepping closer. Grant Miller, right? You remember him, don't you? Harper sure did. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before narrowing into a glare. Who the hell is Harper? My investigator, I said, enjoying the way her bravado wavered. She found everything, Ava. Your boyfriend's lawsuits, his debts, and your involvement in all of it. So, let me make this clear. You're not starting a new life. You're walking into a nightmare. She was silent for a moment, but then she laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. God, you're pathetic. Do you really think this is going to change anything? You can wave those papers around all you want, but you can't stop me. You're wrong, I said calmly, because I've already frozen our accounts. Every penny you tried to take, gone. And as for the apartment, the sale is on hold. The forgery alone guarantees that much. Her face twisted with fury. You think this is a win for you? You're just delaying the inevitable. No, Ava, I said, my voice steady. This is me taking back control. At that moment, the door opened, and Grant walked in. He stopped in his tracks when he saw me standing there, folder in hand, and Ava looking like she was ready to explode. What the hell is this? He asked, his voice sharp. I turned to him, keeping my expression calm. This, Grant, is the moment your little scam falls apart. He glanced at Ava, who was glaring daggers at me. What's he talking about? He demanded. Ava hesitated, but I didn't give her the chance to lie. He's talking about how the two of you thought you could screw me over, sell my apartment, and skip town with my money. But here's the thing. When you forge signatures and commit fraud, it doesn't end well. Grant's face darkened. You don't have anything on me. I laughed, a low, cold sound. You really think Ava didn't leave a trail? Between her texts, the bank transfers, and your shady real estate deals, there's enough here to bury both of you. You son of a... Grant started toward me, but Ava grabbed his arm. Don't, she said, her voice low and strained. He turned to her, confused. What the hell is going on, Ava? You said this was handled. I thought it was, she snapped, her composure slipping entirely. But clearly, he's not as stupid as I thought. The two of them started arguing, their voices overlapping, but I wasn't listening. I was watching them unravel, enjoying the chaos they'd created for themselves. When the shouting finally died down, I spoke again, my tone sharp and deliberate. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over any claim you think you have to the apartment. You're going to walk away from this without another cent of my money. And if you try anything else, I'll make sure the police have everything they need to put you both behind bars. Ava stared at me, her face pale but defiant. You can't make me do anything. I smiled. We'll see about that. Grant looked like he wanted to hit something or someone, but he knew better than to escalate. Come on, he said to Ava, grabbing her arm. Let's go. She hesitated, her eyes locked on mine, but eventually, she let him pull her toward the door. As they left, I called after her. Enjoy your new life, Ava. It's going to be a short one. The door slammed shut behind them, and I stood there, the tension in my chest finally starting to ease. This wasn't over, not completely, but for now I had the upper hand, and that was enough. The next morning, I woke to an inbox flooded with updates. Victor had emailed me the official legal filings, and Harper had sent even more dirt on Grant and Ava's tangled mess of lies. Apparently, their little scheme wasn't just about my apartment or bank accounts, it was about covering up debts Grant owed to a handful of very dangerous people. By noon, I had pieced together the full picture. Grant's real estate firm was on the brink of collapse, held together by shady deals and fake investors. He'd been using Ava as his personal ATM, bleeding her dry just as she was trying to bleed me. It was poetic in a way, but the piece de resistance? Harper had uncovered a secret. Grant wasn't just Ava's new man. He had a wife of his own, a wife who was blissfully unaware of his double life. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the revelation settle over me. This was it. This was my ace in the hole. I called Harper immediately. I want her contact information, I said. You're sure about this? She asked. Absolutely. An hour later, I had everything I needed. Her name was Lisa Miller, and she worked as an executive at a tech company. A quick search revealed her office address, her social media profiles, and even a professional headshot that radiated confidence. She looked like someone who didn't tolerate bullshit, a trait I planned to put to good use. By late afternoon, I was standing in the lobby of her building, holding a sleek manila envelope filled with every damning piece of evidence I had on Grant and Ava. The receptionist hesitated when I asked to see Lisa, but a quick mention of personal business got me past the gate. When Lisa walked into the conference room where I was waiting, I could tell she wasn't the type to waste time. Her sharp eyes scanned me from head to toe before she extended a hand. I'm Lisa Miller, she said briskly. And you are? Ethan, I said, shaking her hand. Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice. I wouldn't have come if it weren't important. She crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. You've got 5 minutes. I wasted no time. Your husband, Grant, has been having an affair with my wife, Ava. Together, they've been running a scheme to drain my bank accounts and sell my apartment without my consent. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt. I slid the envelope across the table. Inside, you'll find proof. Bank transfers, text messages, even details about Grant's failing business. He's been using Ava to keep his operation afloat. I thought you deserved to know. Lisa stared at the envelope for a long moment before picking it up. She opened it carefully, her face unreadable as she flipped through the documents. When she finally looked up, her expression was ice cold. How long has this been going on? Months, I said. Maybe longer. She let out a slow, measured breath, her fingers tightening around the envelope. And what do you want from me? Nothing, I said honestly. This isn't about leverage or revenge. I just figured you'd want the truth before he drags you down with him. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, something like gratitude flickered there. You've given me a lot to think about, Ethan. That's all I can ask, I said, standing to leave. But before I reached the door, she called out to me. Ethan. I turned. If what's in here is true, she said, holding up the envelope, he's not going to walk away from this unscathed. Neither is she. I nodded. That's the idea. The next 2 days were a whirlwind. I didn't hear from Ava or Grant, but I didn't need to. Victor called to confirm that the forgery investigation was moving forward, and the bank had officially blocked all funds Ava had tried to transfer. My financial life was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Then, on the 3rd day, the explosion I'd been waiting for finally came. It started with a phone call from Ava. I ignored it, then another, and another. By the time the 5th call came through, I picked up, my tone bored. "What do you want? You bastard!" she screamed, her voice shrill and panicked. "What did you do?" I smiled to myself. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Grant's wife. She knows everything. He's freaking out. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Actually, I do," I said calmly. "I've leveled the playing field." "You've ruined us," she shrieked. "Do you even care what happens now?" "Not even a little," I said, hanging up before she could say another word. By the end of the day, Harper sent me an update. Grant's business was officially under investigation, and Lisa had filed for divorce. She wasn't just leaving him. She was going after every last asset he had left. Ava, meanwhile, was left scrambling, her carefully constructed fantasy life crumbling faster than she could pick up the pieces. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The game wasn't just over. I'd won. The fallout from my move was swift and spectacular. Ava had always prided herself on control, always knowing what to say, what to do, and how to twist the narrative in her favor. But now, she was unraveling, and I was watching every satisfying second of it. Started small. A few panicked texts, one after another. "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. You're going to regret this. Call me now." I didn't reply to any of them. She had spent months disregarding my feelings, my time, and my worth. The least she could do was sit in silence and wonder what was coming next. But Ava didn't do silence well. By the afternoon, she showed up at the apartment unannounced, hammering on the door like her life depended on it. I took my time answering. When I finally opened it, she shoved past me, her face flushed with anger. "What the hell are you playing at, Ethan?" "Good to see you too, Ava," I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. She spun around, her eyes blazing. "Don't act like you're above this. You've ruined everything." "You mean you ruined everything?" I said, my voice calm. "I just made sure you couldn't profit from it." Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "Do you even understand what you've done? Grant's business is collapsing. His wife is bleeding him dry, and now I'm stuck in the middle." "That's not my problem," I said with a shrug. "You made your bed, Ava. Lie in it." She let out a bitter laugh, pacing the room like a caged animal. "You think this makes you better than me? You think you've won?" "I don't think, Ava," I said, my voice turning cold. "I know." She stopped pacing and glared at me, her face a mask of fury. "You're pathetic," she spat. "You couldn't handle the fact that someone finally saw through your boring, mediocre life, so you had to drag me down with you. That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show." "You mean the life we built together? The one you decided wasn't good enough because you'd rather chase some sleazy con man with a mountain of debt?" She crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. "At least he knows how to take risks. At least he's exciting." I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "Exciting? You mean reckless, unstable, and on the verge of bankruptcy?" "Sure, Ava, that's a real thrill ride. How's that working out for you now?" Her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen in years, doubt. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the venom she'd perfected over time. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You think you've got the upper hand, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." "Neither do you," I said, stepping closer until we were nearly nose to nose. "Because I'm done playing by your rules, Ava. This is my game now." She stared at me for a long moment, her breathing shallow, before finally turning on her heel. "This isn't over," she hissed, slamming the door behind her. As soon as she was gone, I let out a long breath. The tension in the room was suffocating, but I didn't regret a single word I'd said. She could threaten me all she wanted. The truth was, she was out of moves, but the satisfaction didn't last long. That night, I got a call from Harper. Her tone was serious, almost grim. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "Ava's not giving up. She met with Grant earlier today, at some motel off the highway. They're scrambling to figure out a way out of this mess." I rubbed a hand over my face, the weight of her words sinking in. "What are they planning?" "Hard to say," Harper admitted. "But I overheard enough to know they're desperate. Grant's convinced he can make some big deal happen to save himself. But Ava, she's more focused on you." "On me?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "She's angry, Ethan," Harper said. "And when people like her get angry, they get reckless. You need to be careful." I hung up, my mind racing. Ava was cornered, and cornered people make dangerous decisions. If she thought she could hurt me to regain control, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The next day, I set my own plan into motion. Harper had given me more than just intel on Ava and Grant's movements. She'd also uncovered a few skeletons in Grant's closet that even Ava didn't know about. Namely, his connection to a local loan shark with a reputation for making people disappear when debts went unpaid. It wasn't hard to figure out where this was headed. Grant's so-called big deal was likely a last-ditch attempt to pay off his debts before the sharks closed in. And if Ava had hitched her wagon to him, she was about to go down with the ship. By the end of the day, I had everything I needed to tighten the noose. Harper sent me one final piece of leverage: a recorded conversation between Grant and one of his investors. The man's voice was unmistakable, cold, menacing, and making it clear that Grant was out of time. I forwarded the recording to Lisa with a short note. "Thought you'd find this interesting." Her response came quickly. "Grant's finished. Let me know if there's anything else you need." I leaned back in my chair, a small smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Ava and Grant thought they could manipulate me, destroy me, and walk away unscathed. But they'd underestimated just how far I was willing to go to make sure they didn't get away with it. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. 2 days later, the hammer finally dropped. It started with a text from Harper. "You're going to want to see this. Check the news." I opened my phone, and there it was, a breaking news story plastered across every major local outlet. Real estate mogul Grant Miller arrested in connection to fraud, pending investigation into financial misconduct. The photo beneath the headline was priceless. Grant, looking disheveled and furious, being led out of his office in handcuffs. The accompanying article detailed a laundry list of charges: fraudulent property sales, embezzlement, and links to illegal financial dealings. Ava's name wasn't mentioned in the article, but that wouldn't last long. Harper had assured me she'd been spotted at several meetings with Grant and his clients. She wasn't just a bystander. She was part of his operation. And now, she was on her own. It didn't take long for her to come crawling back. That evening, I was in the middle of a late dinner when my phone buzzed. I checked the caller ID, Ava. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But something about the timing made me curious. I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "What?" Her voice was frantic, teetering on the edge of hysteria. "Ethan, please. I need to talk to you. It's an emergency." "An emergency?" I repeated, feigning disinterest. "What kind of emergency?" "Grant's been arrested," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "They're coming after me next. I don't know what to do." I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "Sounds like a personal problem." "Don't do this," she begged. "You don't understand what's happening. They're saying I was involved, but I wasn't. You know I wasn't." I almost laughed at the sheer audacity of her denial. "Wasn't involved? Ava, you forged my signature. You drained our accounts. You helped Grant pull off his scams. You're just as guilty as he is." "I was manipulated," she insisted, her voice breaking. "He lied to me, Ethan. He promised me." "Save it," I said, cutting her off. "You didn't care about the lies when you thought you were getting away with it." Her tone shifted then, the desperation replaced by something colder, sharper. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Sitting there, judging me like you're better than this." "I don't think I'm better," I said. "I know I'm better." She let out a bitter laugh. "You're not going to help me, are you? You'd rather see me destroyed than lift a finger to help the woman you swore to love. You destroyed yourself, Ava." I said, my voice firm. And if you think for 1 second that I'd risk myself to save you after everything you've done, you're delusional. There was a long pause, and then she said, fine, but don't think this is over, Ethan. I'll find a way out of this, with or without your help. I hung up without responding, her words ringing hollow in my ears. Ava had made her bed, and now she would lie in it. The next morning, Victor called me with the news I'd been waiting for. Ava's lawyer reached out, he said. She's ready to settle. No alimony, no further claims on your assets. She just wants out. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, the culmination of weeks of planning and maneuvering finally paying off. Good, I said. Make sure she signs whatever needs signing. I want this over. Victor chuckled. Don't worry. By the time I'm done, she won't even have enough leverage to negotiate a parking ticket. The paperwork was finalized within days. Ava's name was officially removed from the apartment, and every penny she tried to siphon was either frozen or recovered. She was left with nothing but the fallout of her decisions. As for Grant, his charges multiplied by the day. Lisa had made good on her promise to go after him with everything she had, and Harper assured me the loan sharks weren't far behind. He was finished, and with him, Ava's escape plan crumbled to dust. On the day the divorce was finalized, I sat in the now-empty apartment, a bottle of whiskey on the table in front of me. The silence was different this time, calm, peaceful. I poured myself a glass and raised it in a silent toast to everything I'd endured. Ava and Grant had tried to burn my life to the ground, but in the end, they were the ones left in ashes. For the first time in a long time, I felt free.